don't go skipping around just yet. Listen to what I'm about to say. I swear it will save you time. In this video, I'm going to be sharing my settings for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Each category of settings will be marked with chapters so you can jump around to what is relevant for you if you're looking for specifics. And if you're looking to double check your settings or just copy things very quickly and you don't care to learn about all the nitty-gritty of how things work, I will at the end of this video be scrolling through all my settings without any commentary so you can just go through and grab what you need quickly. But I recommend you follow along with me and walk through these settings. It's important to get everything dialed in right so you get the best performance out of your hardware and from yourself so you can improve as a player. Starting off at the top with the controller, first we have the aiming input device. This is where you would put in if you're using controller or mouse, and there is a drop down where you can use specifics for the menus if you would like. Down in the inputs under the button layout, I personally like to play on tactical. This will default on default. What tactical does is it switches your crouch and your melee button, so your crouch will be your analog stick, and this is just a bit more reactive. It's easier to drop shot, easier to crouch, easier to slide cancel if you want to. All the other settings you can explore and experiment if you like. Some people like bumper jumper, but I myself like to use tactical. Bumper ping I leave off, the flip settings I leave off, and stick layout I leave at default because these give you the classic Call of Duty controls. And for controller vibration, I actually leave this on. This is completely up to you if you want to leave this on and off. A lot of people like to leave it off, but they recently added a slider where you can control the intensity of the vibration. I like to put that at 50%. Just gives me some feedback, and I like that feeling with my guns. Dead zone inputs. This is, you definitely want to expand this down here because this is really important, and this will vary from controller to controller. What dead zones are essentially these neutral points where your analog sticks are relaxed in. When you cross the middle point, that's known as the dead zone, which is represented by that little inner circle on the chart on the right. So what we want to adjust are the left stick minimum and the right stick minimum. Left stick max you want to leave all the way up 99, same for right stick max, and the left triggers you want to put all the way down by 1. These typically don't have any issues you need to adjust for, and you want it to be at 1 so they are responsive as can be. For the left and right stick minimums, you want these to be as low as possible, ideally at 0, because this will give you full control over your analog stick. The only reason you would adjust these is to fight stick drift, which is when you're not touching your controller, but your character will move by yourself. Increasing these will expand that dead zone threshold and eliminate stick drift essentially, but the downside with that is that you lose more control over your sticks. It's great that they added dead zone testing within the settings themselves, so you can go ahead and turn these on and it'll activate on the side. And you'll see here, actually you can see I'm not even moving my controller. You can see my right stick's moving a little bit just by moving my controller around. That's because this is a little bit loose and touchy. But if I actually move my right stick around, it doesn't actually, you can see it still resets to 0 and the bottom axes are still at 0. Now my left stick on the other hand, I adjust this and it doesn't, yeah, you can see -1, 1. It doesn't always go back to 0, 0 because there is some drift with this. So I'll need to go down to my minimum input and I'll just do something extreme example. I would actually shows you what your threshold is. But now if I go into here and flick this around, it'll always go to 0. So play around with your dead zones, make sure you get those dialed in correctly, but ideally you want these down to as low as possible to the point where you're moving your stick around and it will still reset to 0, 0 within the testing. But moving on to the aiming category, your horizontal and vertical stick sensitivities are totally down to your comfort with aiming. I keep mine at 9, maybe you're at 2, maybe you're at 18. Put it at whatever feels comfortable so you can still hit your targets. I personally don't like any of these settings that mess with my sensitivity, so I don't touch the ADS multiplier, the sensitivity multiplier, the vertical aim axes. I leave those all at default. You could go in and tweak different sensitivities for different scopes and all that, but I like to keep everything default so I just know what to expect when I'm using weapons. Now, aim response curve type. This is another important one. There are 3 different types of aim response curves. You have standard, which uses the standard S curve. This is the most natural aim assist curve. It obeys the laws of motion. When you move your analog stick, making a small adjustment will actually make a small adjustment in game, and the more you push it, the more that adjustment will ramp up. Now, dynamic is the complete opposite of that. It uses a reverse S curve, so when you start to make an adjustment with your analog stick and make that small adjustment, it'll actually be a large adjustment, and then the more you push that analog stick, the smaller the adjustment gets over time. This uses a 1-to-1 curve, which is actually just a straight line. This is what you'd actually want if you're using a mouse to aim, but it doesn't really work well with controller or with how analog sticks are designed in general with their dead zone. So you're choosing between standard and dynamic, and both of these are viable. You're going to be seeing similar results once you get used to both after practicing a bunch, at least when it comes down to aiming. The reason I like dynamic over standard is because of movement. That reverse S curve allows you to rotate your character a lot faster than you can with standard. I've adjusted to it over the last few years, and when you have control free sound like I do, it makes it even easier to control your character overall. It just feels way more natural, but this setting is completely up to you. As I mentioned earlier, you know, the slope scale I don't touch, the multiplier I don't touch, which means transition timing doesn't matter. Custom sensitivity, this is where you go in to do the different sensitivities per optic, but again, I don't touch that. I personally would recommend to leave that off. Of course, you want to turn aim assist on. If you don't have it on, you're going to struggle on controller. For aim assist type, it really comes down to default and Black Ops. I personally recommend default. They're both pretty similar, but default I just see being the most future-proof. I really don't see the Black Ops aim assist curve coming back. I actually see them removing that in the future. Precision and focusing, on the other hand, will have some really strong aim assist slowdown. This might be something you want to try out if you're a sniper maybe and you like to quick scope. But the reason I don't recommend this is because you lose rotational aim assist, which is the really strong aim assist in this game. You can try them all out and see what you like best, but I personally would go with default. And for the third person correction, I leave this at assist because it will prioritize keeping your target in track for aim assist and not whatever you're looking at, and it feels more natural for like third person gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, lastly we got the gameplay category here. A lot of these settings I have customized for the classic Call of Duty controls, and to make things feel a little more natural. Automatic sprint I leave off. Sprint behavior I keep on toggle. Automatic move forward I leave off. Tactical sprint behavior, I think this defaults on double tap. I like to put it on single tap sprint. The reason I do this is to reduce wear and tear on my thumb and my controller. With the double tap setting, you'll always have to double tap regardless if you are sprinting or not sprinting. The same applies to single tap sprint. However, if I'm already in a sprint, I only need to press the sprint button once, and I'll only be pressing the sprint button again when I'm in a sprint if I want to get into a tactical sprint. So the double tap in that scenario seems really redundant, and that's why I choose single tap sprint. Ground mantle I will leave on, so I have the option to mantle on ground objects. Airborne automatic mantle I leave on partial. This will only mantle if it can prevent a fall, but otherwise it gives you full control and you won't be automatically mantling when you don't want to. Automatic ground mantling I leave off though, because I don't want to auto hurdle over something accidentally, like say the bottom of the map rust. I'd much rather have control over that, and if I want to go over, it's easy to just press A. I don't have to time a jump and everything like that. Slide behavior, I like to keep on tap to slide. However, may want to put this to slide only if you are a slide canceling enthusiast. Reason is it will eliminate that slight delay the game has waiting for the dive input when you have these first two settings on, and theoretically this will speed up your slide canceling a little bit, but personally I like tap to slide. I like to trigger my plunging. It gives me more personal control. Parachute auto deploy, I'd put this on, well, it depends on what kind of player you are. If you're really experienced, you can turn this off. If you're like me, you like plane only because it saves you from embarrassing deaths when you're jumping out of a plane in Warzone, or you can have it always on, and this will always deploy so you can avoid falling deaths in game. Sprinting door bash I leave on. It's just a nice mechanic. Mantle only for ledge climb behavior because it gives me more control. I get to decide when I want to mantle. And slide cancel sprints you'll want to keep on, especially if you want to slide cancel. Aim down sight behavior I keep on hold. Change zoom activation you might want to adjust. This is for when you are sniping. The first option keeps all those controls on one button, so you can't focus while you're changing zoom. However, if you put it on melee, you'll have both the zoom and the focus buttons on different inputs, so you can control those individually at the same time. Comes down to personal preference. I leave mine on the first. Equipment behavior I like on hold. Weapon mount activation, I personally recommend to put on double tap ADS. I don't think a lot of people use this, but this makes a lot of sense in my head, especially when you don't have something like an elite controller where you can hit the ADS and melee button at the same time without moving your hands off of your aiming stick. You just have to double tap ADS, which is really quick to do. It's just that, and you're good to go. To get into the mounting state, where again, melee, you have to take your hand off the aiming stick, and when you ADS, this leaves it up to the game's interpretation. You'll be around a corner, and then you'll accidentally go into weapon mount activation, where if you double tap, you're clearly wanting to do that, and it won't accidentally happen. Weapon mount exit delay, I like to keep on short. I don't like instant because you can just accidentally move something, and then you'll get pulled out of it. If you have stick drift, you can get pulled out of it unintentionally, where short gives you enough of a delay where it will eliminate those accidental dismounts, but it's still pretty responsive. You don't have to hold it as long as these other two options, so it gives me more control. For tactical stance activation, again, this has similar options to the weapon mount activation. I like ADS and sprint because I can press both of those buttons without moving my hand off of my aiming stick. With melee, you have to take your hand off your aiming stick, and with the down button, you have to take your hand off your movement stick. And double tap ADS I already have on weapon mount, so I don't want to mix that up. So ADS sprint all the way. I don't think this is a default, but it 100% should be the default. It's super intuitive. Interact reload behavior, you definitely want to have on a reload option, but this really comes down to if you play Warzone or multiplayer primarily. If you're in multiplayer, you probably just want to leave this on tap to reload. In Warzone, however, you definitely want to have tap to interact on, because otherwise you have to hold the button to pick up every item off the ground and open up every box. You want to just tap to interact with all those items to get things quickly, especially when you're trying to loot quickly off of a body in the middle of a gunfight or something like that. However, using the actual tap to interact setting means you're always having to hold to reload, which is a slight delay in that input, and that could cost you some gunfights. So that's why I like prioritize reload. It gives you the best of both worlds. You can tap to reload all the time, and you can tap to interact with items on the ground all the time. However, if both options come up simultaneously, I have the option to control what my character does. I can either tap to reload or hold to interact with an item, but I prioritize reload because the reload is always more important in like 90% of the times. Armor plate behavior, I keep on apply 1. I don't like apply all because once you press the button, it will keep putting plates on until you're filled up and you can't cancel it. ADS stick swapped off. Backpack control, I keep on D-pad. Depleted ammo weapon switch is on. This will automatically swap to your secondary if you run out of ammo. Could save your life in a gunfight. C4 detonation, I like on grouped. This allows you to toss multiple C4s and then blow them all up at once, where you can't do that if you have it on 1 by 1. Manual fire behavior, I press, I don't know why I would want to press and hold to shoot because that gives you less control. Vehicle behaviors are all default, they don't really matter, except for lean out activation. This you will want to keep on melee, because if you put it on ADS, you're not going to be able to have the option to aim down sight from the safety of your vehicle. You're always going to have to poke your head out and be exposed. So definitely put that on melee. Ping wheel delay I have on moderate. Double tap danger ping I put on short. It's just easier to spam out enemy targets with that. And then kill streak behavior I put on hold, but I've actually considered putting this on the toggle. It is a little bit faster when pulling up your kill streaks, but in some game modes you do need that right D-pad, and then it kind of just messes with things. So that's why I still have mine on hold. Maybe you want to try toggle. Try it out for yourself. And that gets us out of the controller setting. That's probably like 50% of the video right there. There's a lot of important settings in there. If you are on keyboard and mouse, this is where you would go to pretty much do the same settings we just went over, but this is a controller video, so we're going to be skipping that and moving on to the graphics. So on-demand texture streaming. This pretty much comes down to your internet size. If you have good internet, you can leave it on large, and you pretty much just get as much HD resolutions as you can. If you have slower internet or any download limits you have to be aware of, you can toggle those on here. Turn off your world motion blur and your weapon motion blur. Motion blur is a no-go, especially the world motion blur. Yes, I know motion blur is cool, makes things look smooth and all that, but it also does mess with your visibility. When you have it off, you can see your targets more clearly when you're moving around. Weapon motion blur really doesn't, if you want to have that on for some reason, you can keep it on, but world motion blur is the one you definitely want to have off. Film grain, a lot of people turn this down to 0. I like to have mine on just a little bit at 0.1. Depth of field is off for the same reasons as motion blur. Yes, it can look nice in instances, but it does have the chance to harm your visibility and target acquisition, and we want to eliminate that as much as possible. Fidelity cast, also known as sharpening, is a sharpening filter, so you can turn that on and off. I like to keep it on, and this is your slider to control it. You can slide it all the way up to 100, and it will look like obviously very sharpened. You can put it down to 0, and at that point, you might as well just turn it off. I like to keep mine at 33. It sharpens things up enough, but doesn't make the game look overly sharp. Eco mode presets are essentially power saving modes, and I like to keep mine off because they don't really make too much of a difference unless you're playing at a high refresh rate. That means you're playing at, like, you know, above 60 FPS. You're playing 120, 240, whatever. Now, these, if I remember correctly, only work in the menus, and efficiency will cap your frame rate at 60 FPS, and low consumption will cap your frame rate. I guess the more accurate term is your refresh rate at 30 FPS, and it will toggle down some of the visual fidelity settings as well. But again, this is only in the menu. So if you're playing at 60 FPS like I am for recording reasons, it'd be nice to play on a high refresh rate monitor, but really there's no reason to have that on, so I keep it off. Field of view. This is kind of like sensitivity, where it comes down to personal preference. The lower the field of view, the more squished in your screen will look, and you won't be able to see as much around you. The higher the field of view, the completely opposite. You'll be able to see more around you. I had to keep mine on 110. You can also expand this to adjust these settings. I like to keep it on affected and default for consistency reasons, just like my aim down sights multipliers. First person camera movement and third person camera movement I keep on least. You want to lower that as much as possible for visibility reasons. Inverted flashbang is a setting they added last year with Modern Warfare 2. I like to keep mine off. I like the flash effect. Some people get annoyed by the flash effect, so if you turn this on, it will actually dim your screen to black rather than white. So totally up to you. This year, flashbangs shouldn't be as much of an annoyance like they were in Modern Warfare 2, because if you didn't know, you can actually turn away from flashbangs if you see one coming, and it will reduce the effect on them, which is pretty cool. Third person ADS transition, I like to keep everything in third person if I'm playing third person. However, if you put this on first person, when you aim down sight in third person, you'll actually go into first person mode. That sounded really weird to say. So I'll put an example on the screen, and you can see it's in first person. It gives you a little bit more control over your aim. So up to you on that. Spectator camera, I would recommend putting on game perspective. The helmet camera really is, it looks cool, but it's really not that useful. So just put it into the first person so you can see what your enemy or your teammate is actually looking at. And that, oh no, we still have I'm on HDR, so I don't have a brightness setting. And then safe area is where you would go to toggle your UI, and that is dependent on your TV. Moving on to audio. For audio mix, this pretty much you want to set to what your audio output device is. But starting at the top with TV, this gives you the tightest dynamic range and EQ settings, which means all the sounds are gonna sound pretty much around the same level. Where the further down you go, the more your dynamic range increases, so the lows can be quiet and highs can be loud, and it gives you just a more pleasing experience. Now, if you are not super competitive, I wouldn't go to cinema, but home theater I used to play on. It gives you a more immersive experience is the way to put it. But if you want to be competitive, I would recommend headphones. This allows you to hear footsteps more easily. You can hear gun sounds. It just tightens up that EQ so you can just hear everything way more easier. But TV is a little bit too tight, so I would recommend headphones. For the volumes, I pretty much keep everything at 100 except for gameplay music. I like to hear the music, but sometimes the music is too loud, so I cut that down to 50%. In voice chat volume, sometimes it's really too loud, so I like to put that down to 80. Again, personal taste. Voice chat I leave on. Game voice channel, you can set, this is pretty much just privacy options if you want everyone to be able to hear you or people in your party friends. You can set that to what you're comfortable with. Last words voice chat is pretty much death chat. I don't use in-game chat. I rarely use it unless I'm playing with people, so I usually keep this off. This is for people being able to hear your last words, not if you can hear other people's last words. I personally don't know why you would want people to hear what your last words were, especially if you're playing something competitive and they can hear your calls or stuff. I really only see people using this because they want to, talk that Call of Duty talk in kill cams or something like that. So personal preference. Prox chat I would keep on so you can hear people in game in like Warzone. Voice chat output device defaults to headset. I'd keep it routed to that unless you have some special recording setup or something. Then you might want to go speaker. Open mic. Okay, PSA for open mic. If you guys use I think this is the only PlayStation controller that has a mic built into it. Please go in and toggle this. Go down to the test microphone setting, turn it on, and it gives you a live monitor of what your mic is picking up. So turn this on, see what your mic is picking up, and then go up to this. The lower this is, the more sensitive your microphone is. So it will pick up every single noise that is getting transmitted through here. It's kind of like a noise gate. The higher this is, the less sensitive your microphone is. But play with that. Please adjust it so you're not hurting other people's ears. You can also mute yourself when you're connecting to a channel, which I personally would leave on if I actually use in-game voice chat, but I don't, so I just keep it off. Microphone level will also adjust the volume of your microphone. Let me go ahead and turn that off. Subtitles, we leave it default, size default. I like my background to be opaque. I don't want black bars obstructing my vision. Mono audio, we don't really touch. Reduce tinnitus sound. If you have actually tinnitus and that annoys you or you're sensitive to that sound, you can turn that off there. War tracks as a passenger, you can turn off other people's war tracks if you're, say, streaming and worried about copyright music or something like that, or just hate war track music. Same goes with the Juggernaut music. And hit marker sound effects give you options for, you know, the Modern Warfare sound. You can get classic Modern Warfare 2 2009 sounds, or you can just turn hit marker sounds off. I am currently on Modern Warfare. Maybe I'll feel nostalgic one day and put it on Classic. That's totally a personal preference. We're almost done here. We have interface. Again, subtitles leave it default, no opacity. Menu size, it's on default. You can make this larger if you need help reading stuff, but we're all good over here. I leave it on default. Same thing with the text chat size. You can increase the size on that. You can change your language here if you speak one of these supported languages. Color customization may be something you want to touch. This is where you would go in to adjust the color blindness settings. You can also go in and just change these to whatever you would like for you, your teammates, your parties, your enemies, all these different things. If you're in a squad, you can change the settings for that. So play around with that if you'd like. I just leave everything on default. Minimap shape is actually an important one here. I think this default's on round. You want this on square because you can see on the right hand side of the screen there, it gives you way more data in your map. Circle cuts off all those corners and you have less data to work with. You want as much data as possible when you are playing. Minimap rotation, I like to turn on. I don't know what the default is with this, but this is how it used to work in Call of Duty. It's dynamic. It moves with you, where if you have it static, I mean, you probably could play with it, but I just think that static adds extra calculations that your brains don't have to do, so put it on. Horizontal compass is the compass at the top. Red dots do show on the minimap this game, but this compass is still helpful. Sometimes it is faster just to look up there and, you know, you can see, oh, the shots are a little bit to my right, or they're going to be all the way to your right or all the way around. And unless they change this, the compass does show fire when a counter UAV is up and your minimap is blocked. So like the minimap shape, it does give you more data to work with, so I would keep that on. Crosshairs, I like to keep on static. It is the classic Call of Duty feel. You could keep these on and it will actually like move dynamically with your weapons and like your accuracy. I just like to keep that static. You can also put on your crosshair dot. You can put on a permanent dot to help kind of keep your aim leveled, or if you need to reduce motion sickness, that's where you would turn that on and off. Hit markers, you can turn on and off. This is where you would go in to shorten names if you want. I have to keep the full name on because this does give you more data that you can use to identify enemy targets. Again, the more data, the merrier. In-game text chat, you can turn on and off. Vehicle hub prompts, I like to fade after 10 seconds because if they never disappear, your screen can get very, very cluttered. And telemetry is also something you may want to adjust. I like to keep my server latency on and my packet loss on because this will display at the top left corner of your screen. And this is an easy way to recognize if you're having any connection issues, if the server's stuttering, if your internet is going bad. You don't have to pause the game to get that info. You can also turn on the clock and connection meter, but I just think that's useless information in game. I have a clock next to me on my computer I can look at. And if you're on PC, there also are more settings for like GPU temperature and all that stuff. Hide settings details only apply when you are navigating menus in game. You could turn this on and it gives you kind of less information overload if you're looking for something in game, but I have to just keep it off. Sometimes I want that extra info if I'm looking at like a class or something. Gameplay tips I keep on because why not? They're not super intrusive. Sometimes they help. Same with tool tips and menu prompts, we just keep on automatic. And last but not least is account and network, but really there's not much going on here, except this is where you would go to filter text chat and the gore effects. There's also privacy options where you can go to change your settings for game invites you get, messages and things of those sorts. You can also filter notifications as well. But yeah, that's all these settings. This Codcaster one down here usually doesn't pop up. That's only popping up because I am doing this in a private match lobby right now. But yeah, hopefully that video helps out. I haven't really done a settings video before, but I know they're pretty popular. And it is nice to kind of catch up and make sure you have everything as it should be every once in a while, especially every few years, because settings do change and sometimes the meta stuff does change as well. So this video is really long. We're gonna see how much I can cut this down in the edit. But let me know, give me any feedback on the length, as how I went through this, how I structured the video, if it's useful or not. I'm curious to hear, because again, this is the first time I'm doing this. Hopefully it helped. If it did, make sure you hit that like button and get subscribed, because Modern Warfare 3 content is coming out on this channel, and you don't want to miss it. But yeah, that's it for this one. Peace.